A teenage girl wakes in the dark. A small metal key sits on her pillow, like it was placed there on purpose. She didn't bring it upstairs. Nobody admits to leaving it. If the key is real, someone was in the room while she slept. She turns it in her fingers under the street lamp glow. Old metal, worn edges. The kind of key you'd recognize. She checks the wardrobe, the window latch, the bedside drawer. Nothing fits. The key doesn't feel lost. It feels delivered. Downstairs, the house is quiet in that 1950s London way. Pipes cooling, floorboards settling. A street outside that doesn't know it's about to become a story. Then a knock breaks the stillness. One clean tap, not loud, not random, timed, like it waited for her to notice the key first. This becomes the Battersea Poltergeist story. South London, the Hitchings family, a normal home that slowly turns into a place where silence feels watched. The case is remembered because the disturbances are said to answer back. Knocks become replies. Marks become messages. A house becomes a conversation you never agreed to join. What follows is built from reported testimony, later summaries, and preserved notes linked to investigator Harold Chibbett. Some details are disputed. Interpretations vary. I'll tell it like a case file, not a verdict. If something is a claim, it stays a claim. Battersea isn't postcard London here. It's lived in brickwork, narrow streets, neighbors close enough to hear a raised voice. Ordinary families don't expect a haunting. That's why the first signs land hard. It doesn't begin with a monster. It begins with a key that fits nothing and a sound that won't behave like plumbing. Shirley Hitchings is 15 when the story begins in early 1956. Old enough to understand fear, young enough to be doubted. Her father tries the key in locks around the house. It opens nothing. No hidden cupboard, no secret drawer. At breakfast, they talk carefully, trying not to scare each other. Maybe it's a neighbor's spare. Maybe it was dropped. But the house keeps interrupting explanations with small sounds at the edge of hearing. Not constant, not predictable, just frequent enough to keep the family listening. The knocks return, sometimes from the wall, sometimes from the ceiling, sometimes from behind a closed door. The family checks the obvious causes: heating, water, loose boards, but the timing keeps feeling personal. Mention it, and it starts. Demand it stop, and it pauses, like it enjoys being noticed. In some retellings, neighbors notice disturbances too. That matters because fear is easier when it's private. Once other people hear it, the family loses the comfort of maybe we imagined it. Now there are witnesses. Now there is gossip. The house isn't just a problem, it's a spectacle forming. Poltergeist stories often follow a rhythm: sound, then movement, then communication. Battersea is described in that shape. Small objects shift. Items go missing and reappear where they shouldn't. Not cinematic, just wrong. Wrong enough that you doubt your memory first and only later doubt the room. A cup that was on the table is suddenly on the floor. A drawer is found open. A small item turns up somewhere impossible. Each event can be explained alone. Together, they begin to feel like a pattern. That's how a haunting grows. One small doubt at a time, until doubt becomes routine. A name enters the story. Donald. At first, it can sound like a coping mechanism, a label for chaos. But labels have power. Once you name something, you can address it, warn it, bargain with it. The story shifts from there is noise to someone is here, and the air changes. From here to realities run side by side. In one, a genuine entity is interacting with the household. In the other, stress, suggestion, and attention are shaping events into a narrative that feels external. Inside the home, both can feel true. Experience doesn't require agreement to be frightening. The family starts testing it. A knock, if it's there. Two knocks, if it isn't. They wait. And in the way the story is told, sometimes the answer arrives. Sometimes silence arrives like refusal. Either way, the loop deepens. Ask, listen, interpret, react. The house becomes a system. This is where Shirley becomes the center of gravity. In many poltergeist narratives, teenagers become focal points, whether as targets or as drivers. Believers call it a battery. Skeptics call it stress and performance. Either way, eyes settle on her. And when adults watch a teenager like a suspect, the fear multiplies. Then the case shifts from sound to communication, scratches, marks, writing that appears where it shouldn't. Writing is the point where fear becomes intelligent. A knock can be dismissed. Movement can be blamed on drafts. But a message feels like intent, and intent feels like a mind inside your home. Once the family believes the house can answer, they build a code. 1 knock for yes, 2 for no. A simple system that turns noise into speech. It's a human response to helplessness. If you can't stop it, you try to negotiate. And the moment you negotiate, you give it a role. Ask the wrong question, and you hear nothing. Ask the right question, and a tap lands like punctuation. Even if every sound has an ordinary cause, the effect is the same. The family begins living by signals. They whisper, they tiptoe, they plan evenings around whether the house feels calm or restless. Investigation becomes part of the story. Harold Chibbett is described as spending serious time with the family and keeping records, notes, dates, diagrams, interviews. His presence changes everything. A haunting becomes a file. But documentation is not the same as proof. It means someone tried to pin the story to paper. Chibbett's role is complicated. In the most generous reading, he gives the family dignity and takes them seriously. In the most critical reading, he becomes part of a feedback loop, rewarding the case with attention and shaping its narrative. Either way, once an investigator arrives, the house gains an audience, and attention changes a case. Some argue phenomena thrive when watched because observation creates pressure to produce events. Others argue witnesses reduce trickery. The truth is simpler and darker. Once the haunting is public, the family loses privacy. Fear becomes performance by default. Public interest becomes its own haunting. Neighbors talk. Visitors arrive, hoping to see something. Some want to believe. Some want to expose a trick. A frightened household becomes trapped between humiliations. If nothing happens, they're mocked. If something happens, they're accused. That trap makes people cling harder to details. Donald stops being a nickname and starts behaving like a character in the family's account. The disturbances become a relationship. Relationships have moods, routines, and memory that makes the house feel alive. There's a moment where the family realizes the rules are unclear. Ignoring it doesn't always make it stop. Challenging it doesn't always make it leave. Silence feels like listening. Noise feels like response. That uncertainty is the sharp edge. You can't defend against something you can't predict. Even quiet nights become unsettling because calm starts to feel like a setup. People sleep lightly, wake at tiny sounds, scan rooms as they enter, count knocks without meaning to. A house becomes a set of triggers, and once your nervous system learns triggers, it can replay fear, even in silence. This is why writing Poltergeist claims are both powerful and contested. They can be framed, or the easiest kind of event to create when pressure is high. The same detail feeds belief and skepticism at the same time. The case is also remembered for its claimed longevity. Not one sharp week, but a pressure system that returns, sometimes described as stretching into later years. That time span can be read as attachment or as reinforcement over time. The longer a story runs, the more it reshapes the people living inside it. If it continued for years, then the story isn't only about fear, it's about endurance. The daily choice to keep living in a place you no longer trust. A teenager growing up under a spotlight she didn't ask for. A family forced to explain itself to outsiders who want entertainment, not nuance. Even in a skeptical reading, the cost can still be real. Anxiety doesn't require a ghost. Sleep loss doesn't require proof. Families can fracture under stress. Outsiders dismiss as just a story. Battersea's eeriness is the slow grind of living where you don't feel safe, then being told to prove it. There's also the fragility of archives. Accounts linked to this case suggest papers and notes were at risk of being discarded, and that some material survived because it was retrieved. If accurate, what we know today is partly an accident of survival. A haunting kept alive by paperwork not being lost. That makes Battersea, as we inherit it, an archive as much as an event. Notes, recollections, reconstructions, a timeline stitched from what people wrote down and what they remembered. That doesn't make it false. So what can we responsibly conclude? We can say the story is widely described as beginning with a key on Shirley Hitching's pillow and disturbances that followed. We can say an investigator became involved and records were kept, but we cannot claim certainty about cause, and pretending otherwise would be the real fiction. If you believe, you might see a presence that learned how to use simple signals to pull a family into dialogue. If you doubt, you might see how fear, attention, and expectation can turn a home into a machine that produces meaning. Either way, the house becomes a mirror, and mirrors are uncomfortable when the lights go out. The final image returns to where it began. A key on a pillow, a small object that does not belong, placed with intention, or interpreted as intention. A home introducing itself in the quietest way possible. If you woke up to that tonight, what would you do first? Search the house, leave, or whisper, "Are you here?" and wait.